Are we live?
You are live, yep.
Yeah, we are now live on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public. Good evening, officers. Sorry, Morgan Rise, Councillor Rise was, you've gone. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee for Thursday, 18th of March. Firstly, can we have apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Graham Alloway. Councillor Emma McGrath is subbing for him.
Thank you very much, Emma. Are you agreeable that I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Shouldn't take too long. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us through to the first item on page 7, Princess Royal Barracks. Are there any declarations on this item, members? No, can't see anything. Mrs. Bishop, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Wait for the technology to appear. The application that we are looking at this evening is revised reserve matters for phase 1 infrastructure at the Mindenhurst redevelopment of Princess Royal Barracks. Now, by way of some background, back in 2016, reserve matters approval was given for the Spine Road, the Central Sang and the Village Green. Now, just to orientate, we have got the Sang in this area here, Central Sang here. We have got Spine Road coming down here, and we have the Village Green in this area here, which includes the pond area. Now, back in 2017, there was a Section 73 application, and what that did is it amended the shape and size of the Village Green, but it also established the principle of the southern suds down here, the suds area in the southern Sang here. So we have the Carla parcels, we have the green swathe, which is here, which we'll come on to later. And we have obviously the Basingstoke Canal here. Now, this part of the site, the southern part, ultimately all drains into the Basingstoke Canal, all within the site itself. And we have, just bear with me 1 minute. We will go back. Can you go back to the second slide for me after the first?
Good.
This one?
Yeah, that's fine. Now, when you go back and you look at the previous approvals, the scheme before you this evening is very similar to the schemes that we have approved before. However, there are 3 main areas of change. The first one is in the northern area of the Central Sang, which is in this area here, and also here, and also here. Now, this has come about as a result of the discovery of contaminated land, and it's obviously set out in detail in the committee report. Now, the consequences of finding this contaminated land in planning terms is twofold. First of all, particularly in terms of the eastern asbestos landfill, which is up here, which is this area here. Now, stop. Yeah, this area here. The consequence was that all the trees had to come out. So whilst we originally had it envisaged that we would keep the trees and we would landscape in accordance with a wooded landscape, Because of the remediation that was required, which in this area required a capping layer. Now, the introduction of the capping layer means you don't plant trees on top of it. So what has happened is that the landscape approach in this area has changed to a heathland landscape. One of the other consequences of the remediation is that we have had an increase in site level. As you'll see later in the photos, you'll see particularly how this changes in relation to the school. Down. So this is just information on the Sang hut and what it looks like, and then the car park that goes with it. As you'll see later on, it is actually in, but it's not yet open. This is the line of the spine road. So this was the easiest way I could find to put it onto a plan. So you have the extension here to Brunswick Road, which is also part of this proposal. This is the green swale. So we have St Barbara's Church here. We have Mindenhurst Road here. Now, one of the consequences of moving the boundary in this location to keep the hedge on the church and the cemetery side was that it involved the straightening of the cycle footway as a consequence of those works. This is the village green pond, so you've got the green swale coming in here. You've got obviously the village green here, and you've got the pond here and various play areas in this location. And we've also got the new link showing here. So we have the Hall and Woodhouse site in this location, and we have the Tripselhuis residential developments currently under construction here. Going further down, this is another area where we have experienced significant changes because of contaminated land. Now, when the previous applications were considered, this was envisaged to be a wooded buffer between two residential parcels, as you can see. However, contaminated land was discovered, and to address this, the trees were removed in two ways. One, in terms of safety, and also others in terms of long-term stability. That basically they had left some trees, but if they had, they would have fallen down. And because of the proximity of where they thought the houses were going to be, that was going to be a safety issue going forward. We are also looking to keep the pumping station down here, which is at the southern end of the Green Swale. And I'll just draw your attention to this little bit here, because we will be coming through there to the southern suds. So we have come down the Green Swale down here, we've crossed the road, and now we're into the two attenuation basins. Now, what happened here was we established some principles as part of the Section 73 application, but then obviously development started happening, people were starting to move in, and then we had some heavy rainfall. It became clear that the drainage strategy for this area needed to be implemented independently of the overall southern Sang, which is actually the subject of a current pre-application inquiries that we have at the moment. Now, the reason for that is that because of the site, how it drains, the absence of these basins has resulted in flooding. Now, a temporary solution has been put in by Skanska, generally along the lines of the scheme that we're looking at this evening, but it is imperative to get this right, because this is the main drainage area for the southern part of the site. This is one of the reasons why it has taken so long to come to committee, because there has been extensive discussions about what is the appropriate solution here. So as you'll see from the committee report, a lot of detailed information has been submitted. Now these are some pictures. Now this is, I'm at the back of Portisbury School here, so I'm at the northern end of the site of the Central Sang. So the picture on the left, I am looking into the northern part of the Central Sang. So I'm standing about here, looking down there. And this is the newly opened central Sang path into the wider area beyond to the north. That has literally been opened in the last couple of weeks or so. So as you can see, that they have now put in a footpath, so you can actually walk from the northern housing area and the school through into the central Sang. As you'll see in a moment, the actual main part of the northern area, which is where we have the captured contaminated land, is currently still fenced off, but you can walk all the way through now. This picture just shows the difference between the school and the mount, so you can just see what the kind of relationship is. And again, these are just views of the across the Sang, just so you can see. So this is looking south, this is looking to the north, and this is looking from Newfoundland Road. Now, the next thing that we have the issue with is the central Sang bogus interface. Now, the central Sang is this bit. Obviously, the bogus bit is at the top, so it's over here. We know that this is one of the areas of the landfill that needs capping. We are not satisfied as it stands with the information we have on site levels. So as you will see from the committee report, to ensure that we have an appropriate solution of how these two sites link into each other, both in terms of safeguarding all the remediation that is required here, and also to address issues to do with ecology, and also to make sure that it has an appropriate landscape and visual relationship as well. This is subject to the conditions set out in the report. This is looking at the Sang hut and its car park. As you can see, it's there. And this is just a general view within the central Sang. One of the things I will say is that whenever I have been up to the central Sang, there are normally quite a few people walking around. It is already being very well used. Now this is turning to the Spine Road. This is up by the roundabout. And this is me with the roundabout to my back looking down Mindenhurst Road. So over here you will have the supermarket site in the fullness of time. This is looking from across from Royal Way, which is here. So you've got the roundabout up here and you've got the beginning of Mindenhurst Road going down here. And this is looking up Mindenhurst Road. So you've got the roundabout up here, Royal Way up here. But again, you get a sense of the road that's in. This is the new junction just to the north of the school. And this will be the access into what will be the residential parcels between Mindenhurst Road and Deep Cutbridge Road. This is looking north, so you can see the school on your right. On your left, you have also got a footway cycleway, which you'll see in more detail in a moment, which is here. So this runs behind the little mound all the way along. And then this is looking towards the south as you go around the bend towards the southern end of the site. Again, this is looking back up, so you have the school here. The cycle footway that we were just looking at here comes out here. And this is looking from the Tribblehoose parcel. So Tribblehoose is here. This is currently empty, and this will be a residential parcel in the fullness of time. And again, this is looking south. So this is with Tribblehoose just here. Further down, you've got just the edge of Tribblehoose here. This is the new link that's gone in, and this is the Hall and Woodhouse site. So this is Brunswick Road, so you've got a bit of the village green here. You've got the Hall and Woodhouse site, and you've got the extension there to Brunswick Road, which facilitates access into the Carla parcels. Now this is the green swale. So you can see St Barbara's Church here. You can see obviously that the line has been straightened rather than as previously approved, more curvy. I would point out here, these are the gabions. Now, this was part of the existing drainage strategy and it failed. So as part of the new drainage strategy, we've got V-shaped weirs and other bits and pieces that will do the job that we needed to do. You can see here, this is part of the new link that's coming in. And again, you see, so I'm standing with Mindenhurst Road to my back, so I'm looking towards the village green over here. So I've got Hornwood Woodhouse here, and it's closer, so you've got the village pond here, the link coming in from the green swale and across into the village green. So you've got the children's play area here. And this is views across the village green. So you can see Deep Coverage Road here, tree lined, got some equipment for older children here. And again, you see the village pond here, just in the context of Brunswick Road. Again, this is a view into the site from the village, from Deep Coverage Road into the village green. And this is looking within the village green out to Deep Coverage Road. So you've got the new little chicanes here as well. Views of the village pond. Obviously, this is an intrinsic part of the drainage strategy, so very important. And we're also looking at it in terms of biodiversity as well. And this is obviously the little platform. Hornwood Woodhouse will be here. And again, you're looking at the site, play equipment, and then towards the Triple Hoose and beyond. This is the green swathe. So as you can see, the trees have gone. And the submission that we've got this evening shows a detailed landscape, re-landscaping strategy of this area, as also as part of the drainage strategy as well. So this is standing in Brunswick Road looking south, and this is looking north from the bottom of the green swathe. So you can see it come through. So this is where it comes through from here across the road. And then we go into the Southern Suds area. So you've got the existing outfall here, and these are the two attenuation basins here. Now, there are various updates on the sheet that I'd like to bring to your attention. We haven't had information on the specification of the village, the liner for the village green. However, this ultimately will be more of a question of adoption. The principle of the liner is fine, provided it is installed in accordance with the specification. So we will deal with that as part of an adoption process going forward, if and when that is a matter for the council to consider. The outstanding query that we have from the Green Spaces team relates to the utilities under the central SANG. Now, the reason for this is normally this would not fall for consideration as a planning matter particularly. However, the reason that we are concerned is how it relates to the remediation. There is a lot of remediated land and capped remediation in this area. So we want to make sure that if anybody has to come and start digging, that we have a full understanding of what they were doing and how potentially they will affect any remediation. It's not to say that they can't do it, it's just to make sure that the council has a control to ensure that the remediation that it has approved and largely has been implemented in this area is retained as we've approved it. Because otherwise, if someone goes in and just starts digging, we want to make sure that ultimately we have control. We know that we have controls within the contaminated land reports, but this is an extra degree of control that we think we should exercise in the interest of both safety and landscape. You will see from the update sheet that the applicant has raised queries about the 6-month implementation period on some of the conditions due to ecology concerns. We've thought about this very carefully, but a lot of the submission is actually to mitigate for works that have already taken place. So in your officer's view, we think we should stick to the 6 months because if those works can be done once the approval has been given, because those details will be approved if members are so minded this evening as part of this application. So it's a question that they are just required to be implemented. Where we have got some timing issues, you'll see from the amendment sheet that we've tweaked one of the conditions just so it's clearer. But that is the view that we would want, because these works have taken place, we do want the mitigation to go in, for example, particularly with finishing off the landscaping of the northern part of the central sang. We also want the landscaping of the green swathe to be done sooner rather than later, because it has been sitting there sort of just not quite gathering dust, but it's not adding anything to what is an important landscape lung through that part of the site. We have deleted, we have updated condition 16 to tie in with plans we've approved. Now, one of the things that I would say is that we, as I mentioned before, we have a pre-application inquiry for the next phases of development. Now, if I just say that includes Southern Sangs proper. We have got the link here that will link the Southern Sang to the Central Sang. Now, the plan that we have in our application bundle today doesn't tie up with the link that they are currently showing on the pre-application, which is actually going out to public consultation at the beginning of next week. Now, we obviously want to build in some flexibility for the applicant in this regard, so that's why we are looking to put a condition on that says, you know, we want to see details of that link, so that there are no further delays to come back with a full application for to put the link in so that it ties up properly and we have proper connectivity through the site. So I think that is it. Yeah, I think that is it. So the recommendation this evening, members, is to grant subject to a legal agreement and the information on the update sheet. There's one other matter I would like to draw to your attention. We don't seem to have any information on the translocation of reptiles. This matter is still being discussed with the applicant, and in the event that the plan is not forthcoming, we would seek to impose a further condition seeking these details. Subject to that and the matters on the update sheet, the recommendation is to grant subject to the legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Comprehensive doesn't actually quite cover that. Now, I see Councillor Barnett is with us. Can I just, for the record, is he in?
Yeah.
Councillor Barnett.
I think that's one for Sean, because
Perhaps you can discuss that with Sean. Members, as I say, are very comprehensive. We do have, certainly I can see Mr. Passion and Ms. McCubbin with us for any questions that you may come forward. So members, do you have any questions on this one? Councillor Deach.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it the appropriate time for the ward member to speak now, or yeah?
Yeah. Yes. You. But can I just make the point that you are speaking as a ward member and not as a member of this committee. Therefore, you do not have a vote in the outcome of the application. Thank you, Councillor Deach.
Thank you, and forgive me if I sound like I'm rambling. I had my vaccination the day before yesterday, and I'm feeling quite rough, so forgive me. So, first of all, just like to thank Sarita Bishop for her work and diligence on this project. As you can all see from that report, must have taken an astonishing amount of work, and I'd also like to thank her and the planning team for her engagement with ward members, not just myself, but Councillor Rise and Whitcroft. I'm sure they'll speak for themselves. She's kept us informed every step of the way, and that's very reassuring. Now, couple of points I'd like to make is that in respect to the central sang and the contamination there, you know, let's not forget that this is a Ministry of Defence site. It should have come as no surprise to anyone that their land is contaminated. And I think that in terms of contamination, we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, frankly. Wait till they start work on behind the wire, then I think they're going to there's going to be lots more problems as far as that's concerned. But we're talking about the DIO here, and everybody knows my views on the DIO. But we definitely shouldn't be surprised. In terms of tree loss, actually, my understanding is that where the tree loss has occurred, it's actually being as a heathland is being returned to its natural state, actually. So in this particular case, I'm not massively worried about the tree loss over there. And at the end of the day, that's what had to happen for this contamination to be adequately dealt with. But I think I'm going to be less supportive of tree loss in the future. And I know that my colleagues, Councillor Whitcroft and Rise, we're totally united on that. And, you know, we're going to be watching that like a hawk in terms of any future tree loss. Now, one area of concern, I have raised this with Mrs. Bishop, but I just want in front of this committee and for any residents that might be watching, I want just this addressed officially, and that is water runoff on this new raised area of the cap on the contamination by Portersbury School. I just want to make sure that that runoff is going to be adequately dealt with the new SUDS arrangements. So I would like to have that just addressed. And finally, just not that we have much choice, I think, in supporting this, because this project is massively behind and we need it to move forward. So I am broadly in support of the approval of this, but I just want to really just stress that I hope that the planning team will keep an eye on what's going on there with the same diligence that they have up to now, to make sure that the DIO don't slip any more surprises in. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deach. I think this evening's report has demonstrated the way that the officers are looking at this. Mrs. Bishop, do you want to comment on the runoff?
Thank you. I will have draw Councillor Deach's attention to paragraph 7.2.14, and it says the proposed drainage system is designed to prevent accumulation of rainwater on the surface of the cover system by directing rainwater into the suds at the site, with the aim that this would prevent rutting and erosion of the cover system over time. As part of that, it should also mean that because of how the water is directed, it should not then go out into Portersbury School, because obviously we want to make sure that any development on this site does not have an adverse impact on the school site. That would not be appropriate, and that is something that we will very carefully watch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I just may come back very briefly, the new footpaths there for around that location, those footpaths will be heavily used by the school and the children. For those of you that don't know, it's a special needs school. A lot of the children there are in wheelchairs or mobility type situations. So, you know, that footpath needs to be as robust as possible. So I just want an assurance that you're satisfied there won't be any runoff onto those footpaths.
The drainage scheme has been looked at in great detail by both the Council's Drainage Engineer and the Lead Local Flood Authority. They are both satisfied with the drainage proposals that have been put in. However, the footpath at the top of the site that you and I have both seen doesn't actually have approval at the moment. Right. It's been put in and it will be the subject of a condition. So again, as part of that, we will make sure that anything that we potentially could be any issue to do with runoff. Obviously, one of the things I want to make sure of, because obviously Portersbury School is a special need, is to make sure that it has appropriate disabled access. Because obviously some of these kiddies have got wheelchairs, so we need to make sure that we don't have a inappropriate gradient for those kiddies either. So there's a lot going on in that little corner that we still have to sort out, and we have got control by the condition.
Great, that's very reassuring. Thank you very much.
Thank you on that. Councillor Whitcroft.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. I just want to echo Councillor Dietrich's comments, obviously we do send huge thanks to Sarita and her team, to Mrs Bishop and her team, because it is becoming an enormous job, and it certainly isn't proving easy. So we do obviously do send thanks to them as well. I'm in agreement with Councillor Deitch, really. I don't see that we have an awful lot of choice with this one. In terms of the trees, obviously those that were in that contaminated area have to come down for, because they're not healthy. So, yeah, as I say, we have huge concerns over trees on other parts of the site that we are going to be rather proactively keeping an eye on, because, as I say, that is an aspect that is concerning us. Just ever so briefly, just to cover as well, we have the planning, Sarita Bishop and the team have been extremely good in keeping us up to date and updates and what have you with this, but also in sharing concerns in terms of the timing and that kind of thing. And I think that as a committee and as a council, we shouldn't underestimate the enormity of this job and the difficulty of the job, and the fact that it is now running years behind what it should be. I just wanted to make that point, and as I say, to say that as a ward member, it is obviously with regret in terms of the trees, but I don't really see that that we have an awful lot of choice in this instance.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. I think it's safe to say that the officers are very conscious that matters are not going as fast for a number of reasons as one would have liked. But of course, we're building for the future, and we've got to get things right, which is clearly what this paper is about. Now, anybody? Councillor White.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Actually, it's just about a comment about something on the paperwork. The list of consentees includes Windlesham Parish Council, and it's put there no views received. No views were received because we didn't have anything to review. So I feel that is just a little bit misleading and giving the wrong impression to people, making them think that we're not bothering to comment. That is not the case. We just haven't had any papers to comment. I don't know whether that's the same with West End and Chobham, etc. But just for noting, please.
The officers will take that one up and check through and make sure that if it has something's fallen between the gaps, it won't happen again. Thank you for drawing attention to that. Councillor Betton.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Could I just ask a technical question about the contamination? I heard asbestos mentioned. Is that all that it is, or are there heavy metals, inorganics, organic, petroleum-derived materials? What is the nature? Briefly will do.
There's a whole selection. As Councillor Deitch rightly pointed out, this is a legacy site for the Ministry of Defence. So various bits and pieces are found throughout the site. Asbestos is the main one that was found in the two landfill, or the three landfill sites at the northern end of the Central Sound. But going forward, we expect to find a variety of bits and pieces within the site. So, and the site will be remediated appropriately as part and parcel of each remediation proposal that is submitted to the council. We will make sure this site is safe. Thank you.
Can I just come in on that? I know you just said that point, but really belt and braces. I mean, I've made a note here about leaching through on the contamination on through the cap with the proximity of the school and houses. I mean, obviously that is part and parcel of the work that's been carried out. Yes, say it loudly.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm looking to see any other. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I note on page 12 that there was just one single letter of objection, which in fact did raise in my mind a perfectly valid point. He or she seems to have the impression that when residents were advised of Mindenhurst going ahead, that in the design there would be some sort of encouragement for road traffic to use, I presume, the spine road as a means of going north-south, rather than using Deep Cut Bridge Road. Now, I have to confess, I'm at a loss to understand how that could possibly ever be the case. The spine road is by any definition a significant detour, whereas Deep Cut Bridge Road is quite significantly the straightest route through from north to south. But I do take their point that if there was some indication given that the development would relieve some of the traffic passing through the village, then clearly it's not going to. So I'm wondering whether included in the plans there is any work or any traffic remediation measures that are intended to be included as part of Deep Cut Bridge Road to either reduce the flow of traffic or at least reduce the speed of the traffic passing north-south along this road.
It's very timely that you mentioned this, Councillor Tapper, because the local ward members are very aware that we have been looking at the proposals for the Deep Cut Bridge Road improvements. And one of the consequences that we are looking at the moment, and in discussion with both the applicants and the County Council, are the loss of trees. As it stands, the legal agreement requires that there are improvements to Deep Cut Bridge Road that ultimately will have an element of traffic calming with them. So basically you will have Deep Cut Bridge Road as a local centre that will have shops either side, but you will also have things like raised tables, you will have the carriageway widened and narrowed in appropriate places, you will have a pedestrian cycleway which is set out in the legal agreement. These are all currently being looked at the moment, and in the fullness of time they will come to the committee for consideration. But the idea is that when those works are in place, basically people will be directed to Mindenhurst Road. They once they start to do the improvements to Deep Cut Bridge Road, they will have to use Mindenhurst Road during the period of construction, and whether or not that will just build into people a change in behaviour, I don't know. But it is definitely envisaged that the majority of the bigger traffic, for example, the buses and the lorries and everything else, should be going down Mindenhurst Road, and then Deep Cut Bridge Road becomes much more of a local centre for the community. That's the game plan anyway.
Thank you for that assurance.
Can I just come in on that point? And this is something that Councillor Tapper is well aware of, as are you, Mrs. Bishop. There seems to be a space of lorries coming from site going down Old Bisley Road, which is totally unsuitable, and certainly with the schools down at the bottom of the road. One suggestion was put forward that certainly it's on the development plan that lorries are not to use that, and one suggestion is that Skanska may want to put some posts and notices up to say that the road is not suitable for motor vehicles, for lorries. Can I leave that one with you, please, if you don't mind? But it is something that's become recently. Right, sorry, it was a little bit of parochial there. And thank you, Councillor Deach. Yeah, I think you and I have both been doing the same thing, but I thought I'd raise it. Are there any other? I got one other point then.
I do as well, Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, Councillor Dugan.
Yeah, well, just a point really, Mrs. Bishop. I missed the specific item that you were discussing that you were waiting something for, and that if that thing didn't arrive, you would add a condition. It seems the wrong way round to me. This is the point at which this committee makes its decision on what it should do. They haven't brought forward whatever they should, they're planning to bring forward, and we should condition against it now. Once they meet that condition, it's removed. It just seems about face, if you don't mind me saying so.
You can do the condition now. Yes, we're quite happy to do the condition now, Councillor Dugan, that's not a problem.
Thank you for that. I'm just conscious that the original plans have moved on, certainly with the terms of development and something, and the site plan I had was very out of date. And I was going to just put a note down and leave it with the officers that I'm sure the committee would appreciate a slightly larger than an A4 plan showing what the current state of development, which sites are being developed. It would make it easier for us to follow. Bearing in mind the complexity of the first series of plans. So can I just leave that one with you, that we could have something that it just guides us around it. Thank you. Any other comments, members? If not, we have sorry, Councillor Deach.
Just to say that in the consultation next week, you're going to see much more detailed plans, I think. Which will give people a better idea of how the site is going to look and is looking right now.
Thank you. Right, we have a recommendation with amendments. Is there a proposer and seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Rise, Councillor Dugan, and Mr. Scott will be kind enough to do the run through with a slight amendment.
Yeah, just to let you know, Barnett was in before the.
He was, right. Fine, thank you.
Members, please can I have your votes on the officer's recommendation? Councillor Emma Jane McGrath.
For.
Councillor Peter Barnett. Sorry, was that an agreed? Councillor Cliff Betton.
For.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darryl Ratram.
For.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agree.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That was unanimous, I believe.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mrs. Bishop, for that. Very comprehensive. Now we move on to the second item on page 65. Pardon me, land at Larchwood, pardon me, Larchwood, Glade and Devonshire Drive, Camberley. Declarations. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've been approached by residents of the area, and we had a Zoom meeting with said residents to discuss varying aspects of the application, and I've come to this meeting obviously still with an open mind.
Thank you. One of the speakers is Mr. Trevor Hogg.
Yes, sorry.
And, he is known to most of us, but I will make that declaration just.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I completely forgot. Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Garrett, I'm in the chair, so I can do this. Thank you. Any other declarations? Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I'm not a member of the committee to vote tonight, but I did attend the meeting that Councillor Garrett attended as well. Neither he or I expressed any view about the merits of the application. It was more to give advice to residents about the process. I also want to declare for the record and a non-pecuniary interest that the highways officer in this case is somebody who happens to be a member of the same cricket club as me. I haven't seen or spoken to them since last September, and at no stage have I discussed this matter with them. In fact, the only reason it came to my attention is because a resident happened to mention their name, but which I then recognised, but I've not had any discussion with them but just for the record, so you are aware.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. Hopefully, shortly, you'll be able to get out and play. I don't know what the date is. I'm looking forward to the end of the month. Are there any other declarations? No. And Mrs. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry. Good evening, members. This planning application seeks consent to build 3 detached dwellings on land between Larchwood Glade here and Devonshire Drive. The application site, which you can see here outlined in red, is located in Camberley and is to the south of DA30 here and to the north of the rail station here. The application site comprises woodland, and this aerial image shows the site's tree coverage, which is also subject to a tree preservation order. The application site lies within the Wooded Hills character area, and this is just to give you an idea of how the character areas appear in the vicinity. This image shows you the extent of the Wooded Hills, which is here in yellow-ish, where the site is located. And you can see the larger properties to the north and to the south of the application site. Devonshire Drive belongs to the Hedged Estates character area, which is also characterized by large and spacious plots. Larchwood Glade falls within the post-war open space here. Here you can see some site photos of Devonshire Drive. The photo on the left-hand side shows you where the access to the site would be located. And also you can see that there's a soft and well-vegetated streets in the area. These photographs show the application site, which is here as seen from Larchwood Glade. And again, it's you can also see that it's very verdant in character, but the proposal would not be visible in the street scene. This is the proposed site plan. The dwellings would be positioned in a cul-de-sac arrangement in the central area of the application site. This arrangement, with the closely set buildings directly facing each other, would appear tight and would fail to respond to the spacious character of the area. Members will note the 3 officers' comments which have been appended to the officers' report. Given its siting, the proposal would result in the loss of several trees and would fragment the woodland. These trees are considered to have amenity value as a group, and their loss would be detrimental to the verdant character of the wooded hills. The block plan shows retained trees on the dwelling's rear gardens, and these would cast a semi-permanent shadow across them and limit the future occupiers' access to the daylight. This would lead to post-development pressure to prune or remove trees in favor of light increase. The proposal would be provided with adequate car parking and would be acceptable in terms of highways safety. The proposal is also considered acceptable with regards to biodiversity and its impact on the residential amenities of the adjoining neighbours. Here you can see the proposed elevations. Plots 1 and 2 would be very similar in terms of the design, and each would be each would have 4 bedrooms. Plot 3 would have 3 bedrooms. This image shows a 3D view of the proposal, which has been provided by the applicant. For the reasons discussed throughout this application and the officer's reports, the proposal is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have a series of speakers on this, but firstly, Councillor Garrett, you called this item into the committee. Would you be kind enough to explain to the committee your reasons for calling this in, please?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. I've made a few notes to go through just to, if that's okay, rather than do it off the cuff, because I'm sure I'll forget something. So After 2 years as a councillor, this is the first application I've felt I need to call in. There are rarely any applications on my ward as there are limited patches of land available for redevelopment. Having been a member of the planning committee since becoming a councillor, I fully appreciate there is a need for housing. Unfortunately, our limited land where we can build, but this doesn't mean we should build on woodland. The tree report clearly shows there are 193 trees which are in the development area, which, if it was approved, would mean at least 30% of them would be removed straight away, and potentially 60% of these trees earmarked for removal. So having been through the report, that shows basically 46 trees will be lost immediately, 10 to be felled, and then 69 with a possible removal. This application totally goes against national and local initiatives to plant more trees and help with Surrey Heath's objectives of being carbon neutral by 2030. Just within the last few weeks, new trees have appeared all over the borough and on the Old Dean that have been planted by Surrey County Council. If we allow existing mature trees to be removed on this scale, we'll have completely neglected that exercise. In 2020, a cash boost of nearly 4 million to plant more trees up and down the country has been announced by the government. This will see hundreds of thousands of new trees planted, including towns and cities and near rivers, to reduce flood risk and help meet the government's commitment to increase planting 30,000 hectares by 2025. As part of Surrey's ambition to be carbon neutral by 2050, Surrey County Council's climate change strategy sets out a target to facilitate 1.2 million new trees. This ambition is not something that County Council can deliver alone. Therefore, their new strategy is for the whole of Surrey, including residents, businesses, the public sector, and both borough and district authorities, with the County Council taking a coordinating role. Valuing the existing green infrastructure, Surrey County Council developed their approach to the management and protection of trees across the county. This will include the role of planning policy in supporting, where appropriate, the safeguarding of existing trees. Trees play an important role in the sequestering of carbon dioxide, as well as supporting adaptation to the impacts of climate change. Through shading and flood prevention, they also provide significant benefits in terms of air quality, biodiversity, health and well-being, education and economy. Mature trees, such as those it is proposed to remove, deliver substantial value to the entire community, and removing trees on this scale would seriously impact on the wide area with a loss of character and substantial reduction in biodiversity. If you look at the documents before us, there are a few areas which I wish to highlight. Within item 1.1, there is a line which states southern sector would be maintained as a woodland. I would like to propose that there is a condition that makes sure this is actually carried out. I believe it would be also advisable to agree what number of trees would be considered to constitute a woodland. Item 1.2 of the report reads, further objections are raised in regards to the proposed layout, which would appear cramped with the dwellings clustered in the central area of the site. The proposal also failed to provide adequate private amenity space for the future occupiers, as the rear gardens would be heavily overshadowed, and this would lead to future pressure to prune and fell trees in favour of light and usable space. It wouldn't be a planning application if I didn't bring up parking. 4.4 planning for 2 spaces per dwelling, which consists of 1 garage and 1 driveway. So 6 spaces total for 11 bedrooms in total. In what is already highlighted as a cramped space, I would suggest that there is a condition to make sure the garage cannot be converted to living space. So based on all the points highlighted in the application by the officer and the ones I have further highlighted tonight, I would like to agree with the officer's recommendation for refusal. I would also like to reiterate the 2 conditions I've suggested. I would propose that there is a condition to make sure that 1.1 is agreed and the southern sector would be maintained as a woodland. I believe it would also be advisable to agree the number of trees would be considered to constitute a woodland. I would also like to suggest there is a condition to make sure the garage cannot be converted to living space should this planning application be accepted. Finally, I would like to thank the officer for all their time and effort on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Move to the public speakers now. I think the first one we have up is Mr. Cavani. Cavani?
It would also be advisable to also like to suggest there is a condition to make sure the garage cannot be converted to living space should this planning application be accepted. Finally, I would like to thank the officer.
Mr. Cavani, I believe you've got the YouTube on in the background.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, sorry.
Move to the public speakers now. Good evening, Mr. Cavani. Are you ready to, right?
Yeah, I am.
You are. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Cavani. Is it Cavani? Is that the right pronunciation? I hope I'm
Heavily,
right.
yeah, that's near enough, yeah.
Yes. You have 4 minutes and you will be advised when there is 1 minute left and the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. I would like to thank the Planning Officer for such a comprehensive and fair report. I'm speaking as a resident of Devonshire Drive and on behalf of a significant number of 122 residents who lodged objections with the council against this proposed development. The proposal is for 3 dwellings in a woodland area covered by a TPO, part of an area-wide tree protection zone introduced by the Borough Council and brought into effect because you believe the woodland needed protecting from damage by development. The purpose of such an order is to protect and preserve woodland, not to destroy it. Otherwise, what's the purpose of a TPO? Many residents highlighted how important these local trees are to them. Once they are gone, these green lungs cannot be replaced. A massive number, 46 supposedly protected trees, will be destroyed if this development is approved. Indeed, the SHBC arboriculturalist clearly states this is unacceptable and cannot be mitigated by any new planting or revised plans. He underlines and emphasises this by stating the application site and planned development would not meet this criteria. His report comprehensively details the impact of the loss of this woodland and recommends refusal. If approved, remaining trees within the site would render the garden so dark that residents would surely want to prune or fell more trees, which again, the arboriculturalist has highlighted as unacceptable. The proposed dwellings are certainly not in keeping with the surrounding area, as apart from being constructed of buff brickwork and wooden cladding, unlike the London stock brick construction of adjoining roads, they're also cramped in location and hidden in a heavily wooded area, unlike the open and verdant locality, and therefore not in keeping with hedge to state principles. 122 local residents have objected on many grounds, including loss of woodland, biodiversity, and effects on ecology and reduced highway safety on Middleton Road. This is a private road with no footways that is heavily used by commuting school children and where there are already recorded safety issues, including, sadly, 1 death. In conclusion, how, in the light of huge local resident objection and such compelling, comprehensive and expert comment from the arboriculturalist, along with his recommendation to refuse the application, can the committee consider approval for a development of just 3 houses, which clearly brings no mitigating benefit to the local community and instead has such a negative impact upon it? We respectfully remind the Planning Committee the proposed development is contrary to no less than 5 planning policies or guidance documents, including the Surrey Heath Core Strategy and Development Management Policies, DM9 and CP2, the Western Urban Area Character Supplementary Planning Document 2012, 3, the National Planning Policy Framework,
1
4,
minute left.
the Wooded Hills Character Area, 5, Residential Design Guide Supplementary Planning Document Principles 6.6, 7.4 and 8.4. We therefore request absolute refusal of this proposal. Thank you for listening this evening.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, can you please stay there? Members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cavani.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Mr. Hogg. Again, Mr. Hogg, you have 4 minutes and the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm an honours graduate biologist with 50 years experience of working in woodlands, chair of 2 conservation charities, owner and resident of a property backing directly onto the woodland. I'm stating this because the applicant's agent implied I was unqualified to comment when representing the views of the large number of people who have objected to this application. This woodland is key to the character of this part of Camberley. With its trees and wildlife, it also forms part of the Camberley skyline as some of the highest ground in this part of Camberley. The woodland is part of Camberley's history. It was at the edge of the Teckles Park estate and part of the show home for Charles Raleigh Knight's development of Camberley. This woodland would have been wood pasture and parkland before the development of Camberley and is shown as such on the First Ordnance Survey map. Natural England have designated the woodland as priority habitat deciduous woodland. And from discussions with their woodlands unit, they are aware that it includes some Scots pine, but they are happy with that designation. And they state that it is an important natural corridor supporting biodiversity over a wide area and that it should be retained. An earlier proposal for 27 London Road to the immediate north of the site included a bat survey, which stated that bats were roosting there. In contrast, no proper bat survey has been undertaken of the woodland. Residents regularly see bats using the woodland and our gardens as a foraging area. Newts are also seen using garden ponds next to the woodland, and there is a wide variety of bird life. None of this is covered in the applicant's ecological report. The application suggests just 46 trees will be lost. Their tree report actually describes 46 trees as remove, a further 10 as fell, and another 69 as possibility for removal, making a total of 125 trees, or 65% of the woodland. That is a crippling loss of biodiversity, leaving a mere remnant around the boundary of the former woodland.
Right, sorry,
yeah.
You finished or we lost you?
No, lost me for a second. Apologies. The highway design proposed with a narrow entrance between two trees is impossibly cramped. Inevitably, the trees at the entrance and alongside the highway will suffer. This proposal, in my view, should be refused. It seriously compromises the natural corridor provided by the woodland, adversely affecting the whole character of the area around it.
1 minute left.
Instead of a net biodiversity gain, we are confronted with a very large net biodiversity loss. I also believe the woodland should be made the subject of a woodland order in line with the current MHCLG guidance, which says that area orders should be replaced with woodland orders. And conditions should be set in case of an appeal to ensure the preservation of the rest of the woodland as a public space, since that has already been offered by the applicant. And finally, I'd ask you to note that residents also have concerns about the adverse traffic impact of this development in the Middleton Road area.
Right, finished now?
Finished.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for Mr. Hogg? No, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hogg. And now we have Mr. Cobbold. Oh, yes, sorry, I found you down the bottom. Good evening, Mr. Cobbold. And again, 4 minutes with a 1 minute warning, and the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Chairman. You've heard a very one-sided view thus far. Little wonder that your ward councillor comes to you with a pretty negative slant on the case already. Let me give you the other side of the story and explain how we've got to where we've got to. I'll start by saying there are no highways objections, there's no ecology objection, there are no neighbours objections in terms of amenity. So this application has been 5 years of hard work, and I'll go through this in chronological order because I think it's desperately important that you understand what's gone on. 2015, there was a pre-app submitted to the council for the potential 7 houses on the site. This was subject to detailed negotiations, concluded with officers being supportive generally of the principle of development. On the back of this response, the applicant secured the site. He took specialist advice, especially on the trees, which you've heard are the main issue, and prepared a follow-up pre-apps, following officers' advice to negotiate properly the whole way through. This proposed 6 houses, and amazingly, officers came back and said absolutely no development on the site whatsoever. We sat there in the meeting to be told that. We picked this up with senior officers, 180-degree U-turn was unacceptable, and it was agreed that the applicant's tree consultant should work with Paul Watts, the council's tree officer, on the site, look at what could be achieved. Paul Watts should visit the site and they should work together. 18 months they worked together, closely visiting the site regularly to find that solution. That resulted in these 3 houses and the developable area for them, which is in front of you tonight. It wasn't just negotiations based on the retention of important trees, it was also to find a solution for the wider site to stop the ongoing degradation of the trees. On submission of the application, Mr. Watts was consulted. This was when he was still at the council, responded, reflecting the discussions and his knowledge of the site. He realised the benefit of retaining most of the trees. He realised the benefit of managing the woodland. I'll read his response, which seems to have been overlooked here. The proposal is to build within this area has been looked at on a number of occasions in recent years, and a good deal of effort has been made by parties to discuss and identify a minimal scheme that will fit in with the northern sector of the site and retain the southern half as compact woodland. The woodland has suffered from a lack of past management and failure to start to offset and minimise progressive deterioration will result in its terminal decline. The development of the northern section would provide an opportunity to retain the woodland in a managed state, albeit in a reduced form. That's his quote. For whatever reason, I guess it was from the external pressure that you've just heard, your planning officers then decided they didn't like Mr. Watts's conclusion. He left the council, so they decided to take the opportunity to go to the new tree officer. There was no other reason to go to the tree officer other than because the officers did not like what Mr. Watts had negotiated over the previous 18 months. This objection is now what's leading the recommendation to refuse.
1 minute left.
Thank you. In terms of the character of the area, this came out of the blue as well, especially after the previous pre-out where it said it's considered the proposed layout, this is for 6 houses, would flow well with the established built form. The plot sizes seem to broadly correlate with the existing area, and the siting and orientation of the dwellings is acceptable. So 6 units was acceptable in the character of the area, but now not 3. Why not? Daylight sunlight. A report was commissioned to satisfy officers that it was an acceptable amount of light into the buildings. This has been ignored again, even though it concluded that the light was acceptable. It's important that the committee actually know what's going on in the planning department. I'm unhappy, you can hear from the tone of my voice, about how your old tree officer has so blatantly been undermined just because he's left the council, despite all the hard work he did. The trees clearly are fundamental to the consideration, but actually the benefits of this scheme and the retention of the woodland are something you should be looking to support. I think it's a great little development which you should support here, and understand everything that's gone on behind the scenes to get to where we've got to.
Time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cobbold. Members, do you have any questions of a planning nature for the speaker? No, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cobbold. And now, Councillor Bates, you have said, Councillor Bates, you are not a member of the committee, but I will just confirm that you, as a ward councillor, you are at liberty to address this committee, but you do not have a vote in the final deliberations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, and I also want to thank Mr. Cobbold and the other speakers for sharing their thoughts on this. What I want to do is I want to take us back to the actual report, which not some pre-application discussions that may or may not have taken place, which are frankly irrelevant, but are actually the key which is before us now, because you can only take a decision as a committee based on the evidence that you have before you now, and not some informal conversations that may or may not have taken place some years or months ago. And the key paragraph that you need to look at for consideration of this is paragraph 7.2 on page 69 of the report, which detail the main issues to be considered within this application. And there are 7 of them. I'm not going to go through all 7, but the main ones that are relevant for you tonight in terms of this decision are the impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area, including trees, and the residential amenity. I'll touch on 2 others in a moment. In terms of the character and appearance of the surrounding area, including trees, I think that is very well covered indeed by paragraph 7.45 to 7.49 in regard to the significant numbers of trees. Now, what is not in doubt here, despite what you've just heard from Mr. Cobbold, is that there is a number of trees which will be lost as a result of this proposal. And I do accept some degree of annoyance that he's put there regarding 2 tree officer reports. And I think that point is something which internally perhaps can be looked at by the committee, not this committee, but by officers, as to how that situation may have arisen. But I have to say, I don't think, I certainly want to completely distance myself from the comments which kind of suggested some kind of he didn't say the word impropriety, but there seemed to be some issue regarding the planning department. I don't think that's the case at all. It's a bit like lawyers. If you have two lawyers, you'll get two opinions. You base it on the opinion that you have. And what I would say is the secondary officer report actually does cover a number of areas that the original tree officer report did not. So, so I don't actually accept the point that's being made here. So, for example, there's quite a lot of comment about utilities. There's quite a lot of comments about the hard standing. And it seems to me absolutely reasonable on a more recent report to come to the views that they did. And I think it's obvious, the pictures that you've seen are obvious regarding the site that, there was a particular picture of site photos from Devonshire Drive, and I accept we're looking at the outline of the site rather than the middle, but we're not talking here about a site which has little or no trees. It is even called a wooded hills character area. And I would suggest to you that if you take the wood away, then there's not much character left. But I will leave you as a committee to decide on that one. The residential amenity is relevant here. It's not just trees, as has just been alluded to. The residential amenity is relevant. It is correct to say, as the applicant's or the applicant's agent has said, that the neighbours themselves don't have an issue in terms of amenity, and that is covered in the report quite fairly. But it is clear from the three properties themselves, which is the key point which is made in the report, that there would be issues in terms of sunlight, and that is extensively outlined in the report. Even if those two issues were able to be addressed, which they, in my view, they can't be, you still also have issues of transport and ecology. And whilst it is true that they are not actually objections, reasons for refusal, it is clear, looking at both of those reports, that even if you were minded to vote in favour of this, that actually this isn't a net gain for ecology. And for the transport and highways, there's significant issues regarding the refuse vehicles. I do accept the point that we're talking about three houses, so we can't say that there's going to be a detrimental impact on the highway, but it is an issue about pedestrians, and you've heard residents express concern about that. But I do agree that it shouldn't be a reason for refusal. And if I just summarise with the reasons for refusals that have been given, I do agree with them. I think this is a sound report, and I entirely agree with the officer recommendation in this case. It doesn't bother me if there had been 100 people in favour or against. Those who know me know that I always go on the side of the unpopular anyway, so it makes no odds to me. But just I look at this purely on the evidence, and this is really easy, and perhaps one of the easiest decisions that you'll make this year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, indeed, Councillor Bates. Members, you may not recognise one of the names on your screen, and we are joined by Mr. Barnes, who is our new tree officer. Welcome, Mr. Barnes. We'll hopefully be seeing lots more of you these meetings. So, members, over to you. Do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I really want to have advice with regard to the.
Councillor, you're breaking up a bit at the moment. Start again, see.
Sorry, I'll do my best. Can you hear me all right now?
That's better.
Okay, thank you. I'd like advice as to the current status of this woodland. It's described as an amenity. Does it mean that the public have the right of access to this woodland at the present moment? I was unable to determine whether that was or was not the case with the details provided in this application. If there is no right of public access or ability to access the woodlands, how is it an amenity to local people?
Thank you, Councillor. The land is private land, so at the moment there is no public access. But when we talk about visual amenity, it's what you see from the street scene and the contribution that that woodland has to the verdant character of both street scenes. So it's in that regard that we talk about it.
So my understanding from what you've said then is that the amenity consists of the ability that you can look at it from the outside, but that's about as far as it goes. Is that correct?
Yes, and the contribution that it has to the verdant character of the area and also to the character of the wooded hills character area.
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether this is perhaps a stupid question, because obviously of the report and its recommendation, but I wonder please if you could confirm for me, should this go to appeal, is the officer, the department, confident that that the council would be able to win this appeal? I understand that there's obviously could you make comments to that accord, please?
Well, firstly, we wouldn't be recommending this if we didn't think we had a chance of success at appeal. With anything, with any appeal, you're obviously in the hands of the inspectorate. However, one thing I would say, and it's detailed within the report as well, we've had other examples within the wooded hills which have gone to appeal, where we've lost, where people have tried something similar, developers have tried something similar, where they've tried to take pockets of woodland for development for housing. Whilst it's different sites, the argument obviously is it's the very integrity of the woodland that you're trying to protect. So once we lose it on this site, the knock-on effect you can have. So there's two sites I can think of, two appeals where we've been successful on this very issue of loss of wooded hills. But certainly for the reasons we've already set out in the report, I feel that we've got strong grounds on appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitcroft. It was a good question. It's a fair question. Anybody? Yes, sorry, Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chairman. I just will be brief. I just want to bring everyone's attention to a decision that was taken at the executive of the council earlier this week in supporting the climate change action plan and its commitment to protecting the green spaces of Surrey Heath. And I think it would be really important, would be very bad for us to lose wooded areas within our borough. One question I do have for the officers was raised by Mr. Cobbold of the state of the woodland as the state of the trees, and was wondering if the tree officer can give any comment on that. Are these trees at risk of dying if it's not developed upon?
Mr. Barnes, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you. I don't think, the trouble with this application is that there's actually just a general lack of information, I think, especially regarding the condition of the woodlands. What you might have expected in an ecology report is to give you an idea of an overall assessment of how, if it is in a poor condition, how it could be improved, but we don't generally have that information. So we don't really have any sort of baseline to judge as to what is needed to bring the woodland up to a good standard, or if it actually isn't a good standard. The tree consultant from within the application has categorized the majority of the trees as an A or B category trees, which A being the highest rating a tree can receive and a B being moderately less. When we're getting to the realms of U and C category trees, they're more the ones that are in poorer condition. So overall, from a tree point of view, I think the trees are actually in pretty good condition, and the majority of the ones that would be lost are within the B and touching into the A category trees. Okay.
Thank you for that. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Off the back of Councillor Whitcroft's question, is it possible that we can put those two conditions in that I mentioned while I was talking? Because I did those conditions based on the fact that if it did go to appeal, at least we're covering off some of the. My concern is that if it goes to appeal and we lose, then suddenly we could lose a very large amount of trees. Now, as they have highlighted, they would leave a southern sector would be maintained as a woodland. Then is there some way we can put a condition in that says if it does go to appeal and we lose, that we can leave some trees in there? Thank you. And the garage concern as well. I don't know if that's a condition we can put.
Firstly, on appeal, yes, we have to recommend conditions. So I see no reason why we don't recommend that the garages are retained for parking. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Secondly, in terms of the whole tree woodlands, one of the sort of proposals as part of this was the whole management of the woodlands. Now, what we would look to potentially would be a section 106 to secure the management. There obviously were concerns raised by objectors about how this would work in practice and whether or not it'd be reasonable for the scale and the size of the development. And those are tested in terms of obligations. But certainly that would be something which the inspector would need to consider as part of the considerations in any event.
So we don't make a condition as such.
No, I mean, we don't want to put a condition down. I think the main thing at this point in time is we can recommend a condition, but I think that would be better placed within the whole section 106 route. However, because we'd be recommending conditions to the inspector anyway, if we felt that section 106 route didn't work, then we could recommend a condition in the alternative, and it would be up to the inspector. And of course, we don't know what the appellant would put forward. They may indeed put forward a draft section 106 to deal with these issues.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Rickard.
Sorry, Chairman, just to be absolutely clear, I note Councillor Garrett's request for conditions. Assuming the committee is minded to approve, we can't attach those to the decision notice. I think we need to be absolutely clear, but we hear what you say, and in the event that this goes to appeal, in our appeal statement, if we are asked for conditions by the inspector, we will include those in our requested conditions. But on the assumption that you are going to go with the recommendation and refuse tonight, we can't attach those conditions to the refusal notice.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you for that. Members, any other comments or questions? If not, we have a recommendation. There are no amendments to the recommendation. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Morley and Councillor Garrett. Sorry, no. I'll get this one of these days. Mr. Scott, please.
Members, can I have your votes on the officer's recommendation to refuse? Councillor Emma Jane McGrath.
Refuse.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
I read that as agreed, Mr. Councillor Barnett. Is that correct? Thank you.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
Agreed.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darren Rataram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agree.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, speakers. And now on to item 3 on page 101, Matthews Corner, Windlesham. On declarations, I think I've had, and I think everybody else received a letter from the planning consultant. Are there any other declarations? Councillor McGrath?
Just to say that the owner of Matthews Corner actually comes into my shop for his haircut, so I do know him, but I haven't spoken to him about this one that's coming in, and yeah, I still have an open mind.
Thank you, and you have open mind. Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Wheeler, did I see you indicate?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that I've spoken to the Windlesham Society and other residents within the village, and I've also spoken to the applicant. So very much spoken to all sides of the argument and open-minded.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rise.
Also, I have spoken with a few residents that have approached me about this application. I have not given a position, and I directed all residents to speak to planning officers instead. However, I still approach this with an open mind.
Thank you. Nobody else apart from Madam Mayor, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Declaration, yes. I'm a trustee on a charity that rents a piece of land from Matthews Corner Garage. Matthews Corner Garage is also given to the Mayor's charity, and I admit that I was born and bred in Windlesham, and I have a long history of knowing the development of Windlesham.
I think we'll draw a line under that bit, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. I won't say how many years.
I'm surely not. Right, that's all the declarations, I think, and thank you for that. And Mr. Riccio, please.
Thank you, Chair. The planning application at Matthews Corner Garage is for the erection of 2 rows of terraces comprising 3 dwellings each. The application site, which you can see here outlined in red, lies within the Greenbelt and within the Church Road conservation area. The site fronts Church Road, I'm sorry, where are we? Church Road here, and the rear of the application site faces towards Canal Lane. Currently, the site is occupied by a commercial car sales business. These photographs show the application site as you can see it in the street scene of Church Road. The site is laid to hard standing and contains 1 single-story building which is used as an office that you can see here, and also it has other 4 smaller outbuildings. The site is adjacent to Matthews Corner, which is a 2-story block of flats, and to Shanklin, which is a bungalow that would remain in place as a result of the proposal. Opposite the application sites, there are open fields. This photograph shows the street scene of Canal Lane, so this hedge here is actually the site's rear boundary towards this lane. The application site follows 2 previously refused applications, which members may recall seeing here at committee in the past. The first submission, which is this one here on the left-hand side, was for 8 residential units. This comprised a block of flats facing towards Canal Lane here, and a row of terraces facing towards Church Road. This was refused on the grounds of the Greenbelt, character of the area, and insufficient parking. The second submission, which is shown here on the right-hand side, was for 7 residential units. This application comprised a row of terraces facing towards Canal Lane, and the block of flats had been moved to face towards Church Road. This was refused on the grounds of Greenbelt and character of the area. The scheme now before us is for 6 residential units in 2 separate rows of terraces, one facing Canal Lane and the other one facing Church Road. The parking would be as in a similar application, so it would be provided in the central area of the site, and each dwelling would have its own private garden. This next slide shows a comparison between the existing and the proposed volume of built form on site, and this shows that the proposal would be substantially larger than the low keys that currently are in the application site. The proposal is therefore considered inappropriate development in the Greenbelt that would have an impact on its openness. Although the number of residential units has been reduced from the previous schemes, the floor space and volume associated with this proposal would be larger than previous applications, as you can see on page 106 of the committee papers. Here you can see the previous street scenes for the purposes of completeness. On both refusals, the proposed residential development was considered to result in an excessive quantum of built form in this rural location and would appear of redundant and cramped. These images show the proposed street scenes, which you can see they're still very similar to the past refused applications. Given the scale and size of the buildings, it remains that the proposal has failed to address the objections previously raised in terms of its impact on the character of the area. The proposal would, however, be considered acceptable in regards to residential amenity and highways. The applicant has put forward a case of very special circumstances. However, this is not dissimilar from the previous applications. In light of the above considerations, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tedder, you called this item into the attention of the committee. Can I ask that you explain to the committee why you did that? But just as before, I will confirm that you are a ward councillor, you are at liberty to address this committee, but you are not a member of it, and therefore you do not have a vote in the final deliberations. Thank you, Councillor Tedder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I called this one in because I think they have worked very hard in connection with the neighbourhood plan to try and get this to agree with the neighbourhood plan. And I think first of all, we've got to remember this is a brownfield site. This site has been a commercial site for over 120 years. The building on the junction of Church Road and Kennel Lane was originally the post office, and the motor trade has used this site, according to the records, for over 80 years. I myself worked there for many years, so I'm very conversant with the site. The site had more commercial buildings than you see today, the footings of which still remain on site. There were 2 very large workshops, 4 petrol diesel pumps, a reception petrol kiosk, an independent building which was solely for MOT testing and a workshop for car body repairs. The garage had a 24-hour contract for recovering vehicles off the M3, with damaged vehicles being stored at the rear of the premises with their access going in off of Kennel Lane. They had a Jaguar franchise complete with showroom, repaired and sold forklift trucks, and the built farm, as I said, was far greater than the footings are still there than what is actually standing today. They have been moved, as I say, they have been gone down to ground level, and as far as I can see, this land has never been open or green, and there are no strategic views or glimpse of an openness. In the opinion, this is a blot on the landscape. Following the last application, the applicant listened to the committee's concerns, and I believe he has addressed them. They considered the neighbourhood plan and changed their design from flats and 7 units to 6 2 to 3 bedroom houses, because flats were a big no-no with the Windlesham neighbourhood plan. The gardens, they also have gardens, which is helpful, and suitable parking. The design is very similar because they complemented the nearest dwelling, which is the original Matthews Corner house. And the dwellings roundabout consist of all sorts of things: bungalows, semi-detached, terraced houses, large properties, and even a mansion. Garages turned into habitable accommodation. So they looked very carefully how they could tone this in. They didn't just go and put some modern design that would stick out. They tried their very best. The Greenbelt, as we appreciate it, is on the opposite side of the road. It's a beautiful open vista. And that vista will be appreciated, I think, because of the beauty of it, because these premises will look much nicer, and it will complement that openness and that beauty in that corner of Windlesham with the removal of this eyesore. And I'm afraid it is an eyesore. The application is for supplying 6 2 to 3 bedroom properties as identified in the Windlesham neighbourhood plan. And as I say, the design is more in line with the dominant property which adjoins the site. So I would ask you to support this, because I noticed Windlesham Parish Council supported it. The Windlesham neighbourhood plan has requested 2 and 3 bedroom properties to fill a need within their village. They recognise this site is a scruffy brownfield site and in very need of redevelopment. This is a wonderful opportunity to build a few homes of the right size in Windlesham on a brownfield site that will help to protect the virgin green belt that Windlesham still contains. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Tedder. Now we move to Mr. Christopher Clark. Hi, Mr. Clark. As before, you have 4 minutes. The time will start when you're ready, and you'll be told when there is 1 minute remaining. And the time will start whenever you're ready. Thank you. Mr. Clark, you're muted. Sorry.
Chairman, members of the committee, is that better?
Yes.
I'm sorry about the delay. I was still in the waiting room, this wonderful world of Zoom. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity to explain why we object to this proposal. My name's Christopher Clark. My wife and I have lived in Kennel Lane for over 35 years. Matthews Corner is a mere 80 yards away. The application is almost totally without merit, as the planning officer's report clearly explains. This is comprehensive and forensic in its assessment. It's also definitive in recommending its refusal. She's done so by strict reference to the relevant national and local planning policies and criteria, including the Greenbelt legislation, conservation area designation, and neighborhood plan, henceforth the designated criteria. Given her unequivocal conclusions and recommendation, I see no reason to repeat her arguments, except to stress first that she concludes that the changes from the 2 previous applications are relatively minor and do not outweigh its material shortcomings. And second, that the various special circumstances claimed by the applicant are also relatively minor and are far outweighed by the harm to the Greenbelt. I'll therefore address just 4 points. The first is that the only relevant criteria for decision are the designated criteria. There are no others. The second is to emphasize that we recognize that Matthews Corner is an anomaly that predates the creation of the conservation area. We would gladly welcome development of the site, but only so long as it complies with the designated criteria. I know many of my neighbors in Kennel Lane and Church Road would agree. Support for such a development was expressed by the chairman of this very committee in 2010. She encouraged the refused applicant to submit a compliant proposal after consulting us as neighbors. There has been no such consultation. My third point is that this application is the 5th in 11 years. Any changes have merely tinkered at the edges. To date, all have been either withdrawn or refused. Significantly, none has been appealed. The current proposal is again strongly recommended for refusal. And finally, I agree with the thoughts of those who believe the site would be improved by development and support this proposal. However, only if the development meets the designated criteria. But this shouldn't be difficult.
1 minute left.
Simply require a smaller number of dwellings of a size and scale consistent with the extent and location of the site and the neighborhood plan. Ideally too, that enhance the Church Road street scene, which the current application certainly does not. It might well result in a smaller financial gain for the developer, but developer's gain is not one of the designated criteria. Perhaps the applicant is gambling that one day this committee will turn a blind eye to an application that fails to meet those criteria. I'm sure, Chairman, you would agree that would be indefensible. Mr. Chairman and committee members, my neighbours and I regard this as a very important decision, not just for Church Road and Kennel Lane, but for Windshield. I therefore strongly urge you to reject this application as unreservedly recommended by the planning officer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Just to say that members, do you have any planning related questions for the speaker? No, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Clark. And next is Mr. Russell Lowe. Hello, Mr. Russell Lowe. Again, 4 minutes and the time will start. I understand the circumstances. The time will start whenever you're ready, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I note that this application has been called in on the pretext that this current application has addressed the reasons for previous refusal. I disagree with that assertion, as does the report. The planning officer's report is, in my mind, essentially the council's legal advice to the committee. It is balanced, it is thorough throughout, and the report's conclusions to recommend refusal is entirely objectively upon the planning legislative framework covering not only the Greenbelt, but the conservation area, which is in its entirety a designated heritage asset. It is also clear that this application fails to meet essential policies and fundamental principles within the neighbourhood plan. So explicit are the findings that there is little one can add to its highly professional conclusions. The crux of the matter is that whilst the number of dwellings has been reduced, anyone could be forgiven for making the mistake of believing that the scale of development had also been reduced. This is not the case. The individual property sizes have been increased such that the built form now proposed is a further 10% greater than the 333% increase previously refused. It is extremely important to grasp the facts of this application, to understand its persuasive nature and not be distracted by onerous arguments. A planning application must be precise and deliverable as presented in its pictorial form. I would point to the proposed street scene drawings as an example, which show openness and far-reaching public views between existing and proposed buildings. This is not deliverable under the present scheme due to the quantum of built form proposed across the site, which infills that space with new two-storey built form behind. In the last 20 years, there have been only 2 new residential properties built along Church Road that fall within this conservation area that have effected a change of use, both without the need for increased built form. The most recent stable cottage replacing the commercial use at Windlesham Stables on a 6-acre plot with a modest 3-bedroom home of high architectural merit, set back from the original building line and achieving a positive reduction in built form of some 45%. The decision of the committee in this case is pivotal with regard to the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan and other emerging plans locally, not least in Chobham. It is a firm test now of whether the policies that the community spend years devising in the belief they are genuinely involved in planning the future development of their community will,
1 minute left,
when it comes to the crunch, be supported in that planning process. If not, I can only imagine that it will lead to a questioning of whether a neighbourhood plan that was for us overwhelmingly supported by Windlesham residents and endorsed by Surrey Heath Borough Council is little more than an empty promise. It is my sincere hope that this current application is refused so that the opportunity remains open to deliver a sympathetic scheme that truly enhances this valuable area of our village. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, any questions for the speaker? No, thank you very much. And then on to Mr. Rumble, please. Councillor Betton, your mic may not be muted. I haven't got the signal, so you are.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The site is occupied by a car sales garage and surrounding hardstanding, which is used for the display of cars and valeting. The existing buildings are unattractive and the large volumes of parked cars are unsightly. The site is located in the Windlesham Conservation Area and forms brownfield land in the Greenbelt. Subsequent to previous applications, we have made a number of important changes. These include the housing mix now solely forms 2- and 3-bedroom houses, directly responding to the neighbourhood plan's identified needs. No apartments are proposed. Private gardens are provided for all houses alongside the removal of communal bin and bike stores. The preparation of a detailed soft landscaping strategy to include new tree planting. Aligned to this is a substantial reduction in hard standing and the use of grasscrete on the rear parking area. The preparation of a detailed sustainability and energy strategy that proposes fabric insulation standards and a substantive reduction in carbon emissions through a package of energy efficiency measures. Finally, the scheme fully complies with the neighbourhood plan's car parking standards. Case law confirms that it is for the decision maker to decide whether very special circumstances exist. Very special circumstances are to be cumulatively assessed and unrestricted as to what they may include. I strongly believe that the following VSCs attract great weight. First, the existing site detracts from the quality of the conservation area. The council's appraisal identifies the site as one that is insensitive and would benefit from enhancement. The scheme includes appropriate design features such as chimney stacks, fenestration sliding sashes, natural slate roofs, brick arches and sills. The scheme can therefore improve the conservation area as encouraged by NPPF paragraph 200. Second, the scheme directly responds to Neighbourhood Plan Policy WNP 1.2 and the Supporting Resident Survey that identified a priority for 2 and 3 bedroom houses on brownfield sites. Third, the site comprises brownfield land. Chapter 11 of the NPPF references the importance of making as much use as possible of such land. Fourth, the scheme would enable a positive active frontage, a white painted finish, and a scale consistent with its neighbours, a much improved design quality results. Fifth, a reduction in hard standing and the reintroduction of green landscaping to include native tree planting. And sixth, a sustainability and energy strategy that goes beyond the council's standards. Redevelopment of this site is needed if its detracting appearance is going to be removed and the mentioned benefits are ever going to occur. There is always an alternate development option, but in my judgment, this scheme offers a housing mix that is directly aligned with the neighbourhood plan, a scale of development that is consistent in height with the neighbouring properties, and an attractive traditional design that will enhance the conservation area. It therefore strikes the right balance between redeveloping an unsightly brownfield site, meeting local housing needs, and enabling an appropriate sensitive design. The site has considerable development logic, and I consider can be supported for the mentioned very special circumstances reasons. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Rumble. Members, any questions of planning nature for the speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed. Members, any comments or questions for the officers? Yes, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. It's unusual for me, after listening to debate in the chamber, to be as equally as torn at the start as I was, at the end as I was at the start. I have a couple of questions. Are we currently meeting our 5-year housing supply? Is question number 2, is number 1. Question number 2 is that the conservation area, the conservation officer report seems very much in favour of this development rather than against it. Question, and I just wondered if the officer could come back on that, please, in relation to that. So actually, if I could have those 2 questions answered first. I do have a couple of others, but I'm happy to let other members go first if they would prefer to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. At the moment, we do not have the 5-year land supply. In terms of the Conservation Officer comments, they are a part of the assessment as well, but that is also, we also need to assess the proposal in terms of its impact on the character of the area. And that's where matters such as the plot size, the height of the proposal, the depth of the plots, the frontages, and that's when all those things come into consideration. So whereas the Conservation Officer comment is more restricted to a heritage perspective.
Councillor Wheeler, do you want to carry on with your other questions?
Oh, I don't know if other people want to go first. I don't want to dominate the evening. Councillor Hawkins.
Go on, somebody ask a question, please. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. My concern regarding this is the decision to refuse on basis of the Greenbelt legislation. And while I understand the legality, I feel like this refusal goes against the spirit of protecting the green belt. This plot is not green. It's never been green. There is significant hard standing. This is not a proposal in my mind. This is not similar to a proposal of building on a field or on the woodland land that we just recently refused, but this is a significant change to a hard-standing plot, which would increase greater greening into the plot, which in my opinion would therefore improve the green belt. I was wondering if the officer could kind of come back on how is the Greenbelt legislation absolute in its approach? If there is Greenbelt land, does that mean that there must always be very special circumstances, even when we're faced with a plot which is significantly made up of hard standing, and this development would therefore have a massive reduction in hard standing? And so that, yeah, I'll leave it there. But I was wondering if the officer could come back on that.
Yeah. So paragraph 143 of the NPPF says that inappropriate development is by definition harmful for the green belt and should not be approved unless there are very special circumstances. So paragraph 144 lists a series or some types of development that may not be inappropriate in the green belt, and one of them, bullet point G, is the redevelopment of previous developed land, so a piece of land that was occupied by any structure in the past. But it caveats that it should not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development. So how this relates to this proposal is that you have a site that is effectively accepted as being previously developed land because it had buildings in there, so there's no question. But the second part of the bullet point requires the development that you wish to replace not to have a larger impact on the openness of the green belt. And one of the ways to measure the impacts on openness is by literally comparing the size of what's existing towards what's proposal. And such a larger development would necessarily have a larger impact on the openness of the green belt. So that's when the very special circumstances come into force, is when there is an appropriate development. When a development is considered inappropriate, then you can argue very special circumstances to justify your proposal. In this particular case, and in my opinion, a lot of the arguments that the applicant has put forward would be expected from any development proposal, and you could achieve the same benefits, let's say, with less housings or less houses or less built form, which would necessarily have a lesser impact on the openness of the green belt.
If I could just come back on that one, Chairman. I'm confused as to how a business site that is full of cars is classed as open.
Councillor Rise, if I could just come in on this point. The quality of the Greenbelt land, Greenbelt can not just be open greenfield land as we think of, it can comprise a whole host of different types of land. The purposes of the Greenbelt is to prevent urban sprawl, to prevent towns merging, to prevent urbanisation of locations. Now, I appreciate this piece of land by itself is, you know, the view not particularly attractive, etc. But by definition, it still forms part of that larger green belt that we're seeking to protect. And so Greenbelt, by definition, can include awful quality looking pieces of land, but it's that area of land between settlements and between built form areas which is important, whatever that quality might be. Now, in terms of our wider considerations as to principle of redevelopment on this site, well, absolutely. Officers are not objecting to the principle of redevelopment. Indeed, we think it's a good thing. However, all we're saying is the solution at the moment is too large. And because of its size and its built form, it's too harmful to the Greenbelt. What we need is a reduction in built form, which is Patricia has already advised in terms of the number of units, etc. You can still achieve. So those very special circumstances that they're putting forward are not in fact very special circumstances, because you should be able to achieve these things with a smaller development.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tapper, I think I saw you indicate, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, I did switch off a couple of apps that might have been interfering. Yes, I have been reading through the officer's reasons for refusal, and I have noted that great mention has been made about the Windlesham neighbourhood plan and whether this particular planning application complies with the requirements of the Windlesham neighbourhood plan. But nowhere in the officer's objections can I find any reference to this planning application actually being in contravention to the Windlesham neighbourhood plan. Can the officer please confirm that in their opinion, this planning application is fully compliant with the current Windlesham neighbourhood plan? Otherwise, why was there no mention of that being not?
Thank you, Councillor. So reference to the Windlesham neighbourhood plan is made on paragraph 7.4.3 of the officer's report. So that's page 107. And that's references made to policy WNP 2.1, where it says that proposals for new housing developments should respond positively and protect built and natural character features of their setting. So the following paragraphs to justify why, in my opinion, the proposal would fail to respond to their surroundings. And in my view, that's how that would fit into that policy. And I also say, makes reference to that on paragraph 7.4.12 in the conclusion.
I have a similar question as you had, Councillor Tapper, in that on the consultations, the Windlesham Society also made reference to the site failing to respect the policies of the Windlesham neighbourhood plan. And so you rather beat me to the punch on that one. Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, you want to come back in?
Yeah, I would, please. Thank you, Chair. So I'm thinking of appeal. I have to say that I'm thinking of appeal. One of the reasons, as we know, to our cost in other villages for appeals being granted is our lack of 5-year housing supply. Looking at the site, if I look beyond the site, taking into consideration the fact that we don't want urban sprawl, we don't want to go beyond the village centre, there is housing that continues in every direction from this site, and I've got it up on Google Earth in front of me just to verify that. The Windlesham neighbourhood plan talks about housing fitting in with the surrounding area. So what they're looking at is where there is a large house or a road with large houses and large plots, they would look to conserve that. I'm assuming that's the motivation behind it within those areas. But there is a juxtaposition to that, whereby they actually ask for smaller houses of 2 and 3 bedrooms. So it expressly says they don't want 1-bedroom flats, but they absolutely are very supportive of 2 and 3 bedroomed houses. So we've got a situation here that, in my mind, and I would be really grateful for officer help on here, so that I can can stop this going round and round in my head, whereby we've got a neighbourhood plan that says one thing, but aspires in some respects to achieve something different. The main, or some of the reasons for not accepting this proposal last time was the number of parking spaces, which I think the applicant has done well to reverse. I think when it goes to appeal, the conservation officer's report, because this is a conservation area, that basically seems to imply that it would look better than the current situation, is likely to hold weight. I think the fact that we don't have our 5-year housing supply is likely to hold weight. In terms of not complying with the neighbourhood plan, I have to say, when I looked at this in isolation, I thought that it did. I really couldn't see where it doesn't properly comply with the neighbourhood plan. When you consider the things within the neighbourhood plan, which do seem to argue slightly against each other. But then I'm also very empathetic to the fact that I do think that this is overdevelopment of the site. I am concerned about the houses that, in order to preserve the very rural character, and it's an important view along Kennel Lane, you want to preserve those hedgerows at the front of properties 4, 5 and 6. And I'm pretty sure that if I moved into those properties and had a nice huge hedgerow right in front of what will be my front door, I would probably not look after it very well, because I wouldn't want it there, because it would make me feel quite enclosed. And so I have got concerns that we will very much lose that green, very important element of Kennel Lane. But I'm going to hark back to other conversations that I've had in this committee, whereby I have been told that I can't judge what people might do after they move in, and that I can only make a judgment on the planning application in front of me, which shows that hedge being protected. The view from Church Road, I think, is improved in every respect. I've got more openness across to the fields at the back. I've got a better view across to the fields on the opposite side of Church Road from the footpath that runs down the side of it, because we're looking at low-level housing. I don't accept that the cars are any kind of built form, so I totally accept that the increase in built form on this site is quite enormous. But I'm also minded to the argument that Councillor Tedder came up with earlier, in that the built form that is currently on this site is less, the true built form, not the car built form or the hard standing, is actually less than the built form that historically has been on this site. So I'm really sorry. And in fact, part of me really hopes that I have confused the other members of the committee, so that I'm not confused on my own on this one, because I am absolutely torn as to which way to vote. So I'm sorry if that's been no help to anybody at all. It's helped me to get it off my chest. And if anybody could help me clarify some of those items in my mind, then I would be very grateful. Thank you.
I think it'd be useful to come in on the 5-year housing land supply issue. This is not a site which is in an urban location where you don't have specific policies which are preventing development. In this particular case, when we look at the NPPF, whilst it says that we should be allowing development if your plan is out of date, and one thing it means by out of date is if you don't have a 5-year housing land supply. The first thing it then says is that you still have to consider the other policies within the framework, within the National Planning Policy Framework. And one of the important things is protecting areas of assets of particular importance. And one of those areas of particular importance is the Greenbelt. And that's what the NPPF lists. So this is not like even the site we considered earlier on tonight, where you don't have that defined area of protection. So it's a harder test to get development on this land. However, putting that to one side, you can still meet the objectives of the 5-year housing land supply by having a smaller development proposal on this site, which will still provide the number of units, which will still provide what Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan is looking for, but just be a smaller development. So there's no reason why you can't still achieve the objectives of the Greenbelt, but also achieve the other objectives, positive things such as the delivery of housing and obviously meeting the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. The other point I was going to make, I'm slightly concerned. Somehow I get the feeling that the committee is rather not looking at the application in front of them and judging it on its merits. They're rather looking to say what would happen on appeal, rather than say this is a deliberation on the papers and on the application first and foremost. I may be feeling that wrong, but it's come up on a couple of matters this evening that it's of that way around. But it's my view. Councillor Betton, were you wanting to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think looking at the site and the plan, it's clearly going to change the character of the area for the better. Looking, as Councillor Wheeler has on Google Earth in front of me, Google Earth is my friend a lot of the time when I'm going anywhere, because I'm able to look up and down the road and all around. And I don't think that the houses that are proposed are out of character, or out of size. I think it's a thoroughly good idea, and I will be with Councillor Tedder's recommendation, if you could call it that. I will be voting for the development to take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Chapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I find myself in the very strange situation of agreeing with Councillor Wheeler, which we rarely do. This development can only be an improvement on what is there now. Thank goodness that it's only selling cars at the present moment, which doesn't have too much of an impact, although it does obviously have a big impact on the frontal presentation. But I see no reason why this site could not be selling mobile homes, commercial vehicles, JCBs. I can't imagine that if they decided to go into that business, that would be an improvement on what is there now. However, what is being proposed most definitely is. And that, ironically, as I see it, if you look at the huge hedge on Kennel Lane, that not only blots out what's behind it, the openness of what's behind it, but blots out the sky as well. In fact, I can't even imagine, I haven't measured it obviously, that it doesn't exceed the recommended height of 3 meters maximum as being the sort of height of hedges that should be allowed on properties and between properties and local areas. So the irony of this is that approving this planning application and the reduction in the height of that hedge down to waist height would actually increase the openness of the site, that you would be able to see through the site. Surely that is the intention of Greenbelt by definition, that there should be an increase of openness, and this planning application will quite clearly do that. So I am with Councillor Betton, and hopefully I'm even with Councillor Wheeler on this one, that approval of this planning application would actually improve this site. I take on board what the officer has said, that he would like to see a reduced number of properties on this site, a smaller development, he calls it. But as the officer must be well aware that at the end of the day, if you reduce the development, you reduce the return on investment in the development, which practically then makes the development unpractical from a financial point of view, unless the development retains a similar sort of size, but reduces the number of actual residences themselves, therefore increasing the price of those properties to make up the difference, which goes entirely against the whole idea of affordable properties for our young members of the community. So I have to say, all in all, I will most definitely be voting against the recommendation to refuse this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapper. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think nobody argues the fact that Councillor Dugan.
Yeah, I just want to make some counterpoints, because I find it quite disappointing that there are so many councillors wanting to vote against the officer recommendation. To Councillor Tapper's point about the profitability for the developer, 100% not a planning consideration. Don't think about it. It has nothing to do with the way you form your opinion this evening. Anything built on this site would almost be an improvement. But what has been put forward has quite clearly been shown in the officer's report to be against our policy and against the local neighbourhood plan. So I will absolutely be happy to put my hand up to support and recommend the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Doon. Councillor Barnett. Sorry, Councillor, you're very faint.
I'm sorry.
That's better. Thank you.
You'll have to look up my notes probably. Yeah, I want to ask in terms of what is the right that we're under the climate emergency, and one of the grounds for considering the application is on sustainability. But I would be much more inclined to favour a development like this that's looking to create big moves as solar panels on them. It's another thing now on biodiversity again.
Sorry, Councillor Barnett, is there any way in which you can perhaps, I don't know, speak into the microphone more loudly? I don't think any of the committee can hear what you're saying, unfortunately.
Okay, I should try and speak much more loudly than I normally can. My question is regarding sustainability issues, and whether if this is possible for having solar panels on roofs, for example. And there's also this question using about biodiversity gain, and whether that's a consideration. Both these things would influence my decision.
I don't particularly want to make this a sort of a common thing to do, but is it okay, Councillor Barnett, if you perhaps write what you're saying in the chat to the host, and the host can read it out as your words to the committee?
Thank you.
And I don't know whether anyone else has anything to say in the meantime.
Well, I was going to say, I thought I heard that Councillor Barnett was saying that if there was an intention to have solar panels, it might help offset some of the sustainability of the site, and also whether that would have a net decrease or net increase in the biodiversity. I don't know if that's about right, Councillor Barnett, as to what you were saying, or if I was listening very intently. I don't think you can hear me anyway. There's never a Jackie or Weaver around, is there, when we need one? Oh, no, yes, that
yes, Jackie. Yes, well done, Jackie. You got in there. Yep. Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Barnett. I've lost you. You've moved again on the screen, but thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Wheeler, for your support on that one. Councillor Tapper.
Yes, I wanted to come back on Councillor Dugan's comment. Yes, I am perfectly well aware that the financial viability of the application is not a basis on which to judge its suitability. It was merely an observation, and I don't think Councillor Dugan can deny that observation is likely to carry sufficient weight. But my judgment on this planning application is purely on its merits as an application for this particular site, replacing a brownfield site with something which will be of benefit to the community in general. Thank you.
And I will come back to then. The viability of the site has absolutely no weight in plan, or rather the profit for the developer has absolutely no weight in planning terms. None.
That's what I just said.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Right, thank you. I was going to say that there is no doubt in anybody's mind that any development, or a form of development, should I say, on this site will be an improvement. A site is well known to most of us, if not all of us. Some have longer history with the site than others. But the officers have quite clearly said there are no very special circumstances in terms of the MPPF. What we have been offered is overdevelopment of the site in size and built form. There is an impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. Now I understand, and I struggle with that one as well, because it's the openness element of that, but the officers are quite clear, and the professional advice is that there is an impact on the Greenbelt and the conservation area, and it does not meet, as pointed out by the Windlesham Society, the policies of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, and it's given 2 policies there. Those are the points that I've taken down. I mean, it is a difficult one. It's been a difficult one all the way through. However, I think we've given this a sufficient airing, and there is an officer recommendation.
Yeah, all I very briefly wanted to say is, I think just to remind the committee that you refused the previous 2 planning applications on Greenbelt grounds for something which was essentially the same size, if not a little bit smaller. This is slightly larger, and your main change here is the configuration and the types of units you're getting. That I would just remind members as to what we're actually looking at here in terms of the Greenbelt considerations before us. And obviously in terms of the VSC, as already explained, in the officer's opinion, they're not VSC because you can still achieve those objectives with a smaller scheme. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There is an officer recommendation. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Whitcroft and Councillor Dugan, and then Mr. Scott, please. Thank you.
Members, please could I have your votes on the officer's recommendation to refuse? Councillor Emma Jane McGrath.
Agree.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Agree.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
As last time, against.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
As last time, 4.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darryl Rataram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Against.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Against.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agree.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Members, that has been carried 12 votes to 3. Thank you, members. Thank you for the speakers. That is the end of the agenda for tonight. Time flies when we're having fun. The next meeting is on 15th of April, at which, can I say, Good night to the people tuning in. Hope you found that informative. Thank you for that, and thank you, members, and thank you very much indeed, officers. And the YouTube will shut down very shortly.